These are African rhythms, passed down to us through ancient spirits. Feel the spirit, a unifying force. Come on, move with the spirit. Stand up, clap your hands. Groove with the rhythms, get down, get off.
Today, Steve Biko and South African Current Affairs with Andile Mngxitama. In a speech delivered in 1971 in Cape Town, South Africa, Steve Bantu Biko proclaimed that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. This timeless expression is currently fueling grassroots organizing and resistance efforts in South Africa. We see the echoes of this axiom in movements across South Africa, from the Rhodes Must Fall uprisings to the organizational expressions of resistance of organizations such as Black First, Land First. Today in South Africa, the tide is changing. Youth and others are developing a critical consciousness that is informing their resistance to the failures of post-apartheid South Africa. With support and solidarity from around the African world, the people of South Africa are no longer sitting idly by, waiting for justice and equality to be legislated for them. They are responding to what some analysts call the neo-colonial policies that maintains the daily economic and socio-political structure of apartheid that is bolstered by still-present white supremacist ideological practices, which continually exacerbate inequalities and class divisions in a new South Africa. Before we begin an exploration of the current affairs of South Africa, we will first listen to the words and ideas of Steve Biko. One of the African world's foremost activist thinkers, Steve Biko is mostly remembered through the work and ideas of the Black consciousness movement. Although Steve Biko was not alone in forging the Black consciousness movement, he was nevertheless its most prominent leader, who with others guided the movement of student discontent into a political force unprecedented in the history of South Africa. As a consequence of his potent political mind and activity, he is inextricably linked to the development and evolution of the Black consciousness movement, which spread across the world. To understand more about the life and contributions of Steve Biko, there is no other place to start than to read him. One can start by reading I Write What I Like. But for now, let's listen to him. Enjoy the program.
We see a completely non-racial society. We don't believe, for instance, in the so-called guarantees for minority rights, because guaranteeing minority rights implies the recognition of portions of the community on a race basis. We believe that in our country there shall be no minority, there shall be no majority, there shall just be people. And those people will have the same status before the law, and they will have the same political rights before the law. So in a sense, it will be a completely non-racial egalitarian society.
But will the vast number of blacks, after all their experiences, be able to live a life without giving vent to feelings of revenge, of
yes, we believe it is the duty of the vanguard political movement which brings about change to educate people's outlooks. I mean, in the same way that blacks have never lived in a socialist economic system, they're going to learn to live in one. In the same way that they've always lived in a racially divided society, they're going to learn to live in a non-racial society.
In the first interview, recorded in South Africa before his detention, Steve Biko himself talks about the development of the Black consciousness movement and his vision of a future South Africa. The first part of the original interview was cut off. The interviewer first asks Biko what Black consciousness is. Biko replies, Black consciousness is a political, cultural philosophy employed by blacks in South Africa in an effort to shake off shackles of mental oppression and to reinstate the essential humanity and pride of blacks. It was first devised by groups like SASO, the South African Students Organization, and the BPC, the Black People's Convention, in 1967-68, and has since filtered through to other organizations operating at various levels. Here the interview picks up with Biko's voice.
Now the history of it starts off after 1963-64. If you remember this era, there were many arrests in this country which stemmed from underground activity by PAC, by ANC, and this led to some kind of political emasculation of the black population especially, with the result that there was no participation by blacks in the articulation of their own aspirations. The whole opposition to what the government was doing to blacks came in fact from white organizations, mainly student groups like NUSAS, the Liberal Party, the Progressive Party, and blacks were articulate in any sense were far few by comparison to the olden days, and they were dispersed amongst these particular organizations. Now when I came to varsity, which was sometime in 1966, in my own analysis and that of my friends, there was some kind of anomaly in this situation where whites were in fact the main participants in our oppression and at the same time the main participants in the opposition to that oppression. It implied therefore that at no stage in this country were blacks throwing in their lot in the shift of political opinion. The arena was totally controlled by whites in what we called totality of white power at the time. So we argued that any changes which are to come can only come as a result of a program worked out by black people. And for black people to be able to work out a program, they need to defeat the one main element in politics which was working against them, and this was a psychological feeling of inferiority which was deliberately cultivated by the system. So equally too, the whites, in order to be able to listen to blacks, needed to defeat the one problem which they had, which was one superiority. Now the only way to come about this, of course, was to look anew at the black man in terms of what it is in him that is lending him to denigration so easily. So first of all, we said as black students, we could not participate in multiracial organizations which were by far white organizations, because in this country there is an overwhelming number of white students at university. And secondly, these organizations were concentrating mainly on problems which were affecting the white student community. And thirdly, of course, when it came to political questions, they were far more articulate than the average black student because of their superior training. And because of their numbers, they could outvote us on any one issue, which meant that NUSAS as an organization gave political opinions which were largely affected by the whiteness of that particular organization. So then in 1968, we started forming what is now called SASO, the South African Students Organization, which was firmly based on black consciousness, the essence of which was for the black man to elevate his own position by positively looking at those value systems that make him distinctively a man in society.
Like what?
First of all, we were of the view that this particular country is almost like an island of Europe in Africa. If you go throughout the whole of Africa, you do find aspects of African life which are culturally elevated throughout the continent. But in this particular country, somehow, any visitor who comes here tends to be made to believe almost that he is in Europe. He never sees blacks except in a subservient role. And this is all because of the cultural dominance of the particular group which is now in power.
Yeah, to what extent have you been successful?
Well, we've been successful to the extent that we have diminished the element of fear in the minds of black people. In the period 63, 64, 65, 66, black people were terribly scared of involvement in politics. The universities were putting out no useful leadership to the black people because everybody found it more comfortable to lose himself in a particular profession to make money. But since those days, black students have seen their role as being primarily to prepare themselves for leadership roles in the various facets of the black community. And through our political articulation of the aspirations of the black people, many black people have come to appreciate, in fact, the need to stand up and be counted against the system. There is far more political talk now, far more political debate, and far more condemnation of the system from average black people than there has ever been since possibly 1960 and before. I'm referring here to the whole oppressive education system that the students are talking about. And after complaining about this, police, in fact the government, wants to further entrench what the students are protesting about by bringing in police and saracens and dogs and almost soldiers, so to speak. Now, the response of the students then was in terms of their pride. They were not prepared to be cowed down, even at the point of a gun. And hence, what happened. Some people were killed, and this riots just continued and continued. Because at no stage were the young students, nor for that matter, at some stage their parents, prepared to be scared. Now, everybody saw this as a deliberate act of oppressive measures, to try and cow down the black masses, and everybody was determined equally to say to the police, to say to the government, we shall not be scared, by your police, by your dogs, and by your soldiers. Now, this is the kind of lack of fear one is talking about, which I see as a very important determinant in political action.
Since last June, something like 400 young blacks were killed.
499, actually.
499. And you think that this will not be a deterrent?
No. I think it has been a very useful weapon in wedging the young and the old. I mean, before then, there was obviously a difference in the outlook of the old generation to the younger generation. The younger generation was moving too fast for the old generation. The old generation was torn between Bantustan politics on the one side, old allegiances, which were not progressive allegiances, to groups like ANC, PAC, without any result in action. And there were those who were simply too scared to move.
You condemn Bantustan leadership altogether?
Yes, of course. We condemn Bantustan leaders, even the best of them, like that. Yeah.
Well, just a few words on that.
Well, our attitude here is that you cannot, in pursuing the aspirations of black people, operate from a platform which is meant for the oppression of the black people. Now, we see all these so-called Bantustan platforms as being deliberate creations by the nationalist government to contain the political aspiration of the black people and to give them pseudo-political platforms to direct their attention to. Now, men like Bantu Biko, Mngxitama, Mngxitama, and so on are all participants in the white man's game of holding the aspirations of the black people. Now, we do not feel it is possible in any way to turn such a platform to useful work. We believe the first principal step by any black political leader is to destroy such a platform, and destroy it and without giving it any form of respectability. So once you step in it, once you participate in it, whether you are in the governing party or the opposition, you are in fact giving sanctity to it. You are giving respectability to it. So in a sense, people like Bantu Biko, like Mngxitama and like Mngxitama are participants in a white man's game. And they are participants at the expense of the black man. And they are leading black people to a divided struggle, to speak as Zulus, to speak as Xhosas, to speak as Bedouins, which is a completely new feature in political life of black people in this country. We speak as one combined whole, directing ourselves to a common enemy, and we reject anyone who wishes to destroy that unity. Yeah, we are, as I was saying, of the view that we should operate as one united whole towards attainment of an egalitarian society for the whole of Tanzania. And therefore, any entrenchment of tribalistic, racialistic, or any form of sectional outlooks is abhorred by us. We hate it and we seek to destroy it. And it is for this reason, therefore, that we cannot see any form of coalition with any of the Bantu leaders, even the so-called best of them like Gachibutierezi, because they destroy themselves by virtue of the kind of argument that one has put up.
But the government, of course, as you know, says that all this unrest really is due to communist agitation. Are you a communist?
We are by no means communists. Neither do I believe for a moment that the unrest is due to communist agitation. I do know for a fact that there has been participation, it would appear anyway, from science, by a lot of people in the unrest. But the primary reason behind the unrest is simple lack of patience by the young folk with a government which is refusing to change. Refusing to change in the educational sphere, which is where they were directing themselves, and also refusing to change in a broader political situation. Now, when these young chaps started with their protest, they were talking about Africans, they were talking about Bantu education, and they meant that. But the government responded in a high-handed fashion, assuming, as they've always done, that they are in a situation of total power. But here, for once, they met a student group which was not prepared to be thrown around all the time. They decided to flex their muscle, and of course, the whole country responded. Simply because I'm still saying that there are lessons to be gleaned from this whole unrest situation of last year. In the first instance, I think blacks have flexed their muscle a bit, and they now know the degree of dedication that they can find amongst their own members when they are called to action. And they now know the kind of response they will get from the various segments of the population, the youth, the oldies, and so on. And the second lesson, of course, is the response from the governments and the white population at large. The government responded in one way, and the white population also in another way. One doesn't want to get into details here, but reading newspapers, you get some kind of idea of the extent of fear that was prevalent in a white society at a particular time, especially just after the first onslaught in Soweto, where there was a real fear throughout the community, throughout the country. Nobody knew just where something would happen next.
So how will these lessons express themselves in future?
I'm of the view that any recurrence of disturbances of that nature can only result in more careful planning and better calculation, thereby achieving the desired results to a greater extent than the spontaneous situation we had last year, for instance.
And you believe that by these means you will bring about a real change of the society?
I see this as only an expression, one form of an expression of discontent inside. I'm of the view that the whole change process is going to be a protracted one in this country. It depends entirely on the degree to which the nationalist government is prepared to hold on to power. And my own analysis is that they are wanting to hold on to power and fight with their backs to the wall. Now, conflict could only be avoidable if they were prepared to avoid it. Those who are at the seeking end, that is, those who want justice, who want an egalitarian society, can only pursue their aspirations according to the resistance offered by the opposition. And if the opposition is prepared to fight with their backs to the wall, conflict can be avoidable. Now, we as BPC, I am a member of the Black Conscious Movement. I was a member of BPC before I was banned, and now I have been, I'm told, appointed as honorary president of BPC. Now, the line that BPC adopts is to explore as much as possible non-violent means within the country, and that is why we exist. But there are people, and there are many people, who have despaired of the efficacy of non-violence as a method. They are of the view that the present nationalist government can only be unseated by people operating a military wing. I don't know if this is the final answer. I think in the end there is going to be a totality of effect of a number of change agencies operating in South Africa. I personally would like to see less groups. I'd like to see groups like ANC, PAC, and the Black Consciousness Movement deciding to form one liberation group. And it is only, I think, when black people are so dedicated and so united in their cause that we can effect the greatest results. And whether this is going to be through the form of conflict or not will be dictated by the future. I don't believe for a moment that we are going to willingly drop our belief in the non-violence stance as of now. But I can't predict what will happen in the future, in as much as I can predict what the enemy will do in the future.
Can you guess at all at the number of years the change might take?
It's a very difficult exercise. I don't want to get involved in that kind of exercise. Some people say 5 years, others say 10 years. I think we are not at a stage yet where it is possible to fix a precise timetable.
When you speak of an egalitarian society, do you mean a socialist one?
Yes, I think there is no running away from the fact now that in South Africa there is such an ill distribution of wealth that any form of political freedom which does not touch on the distribution of, proper distribution of wealth will be meaningless. The whites have locked up within a small minority of themselves the greater proportion of the country's wealth. And if we have a mere change of face of those in governing positions, what is likely to happen is that black people will continue to be poor, and you will get a few blacks filtering through into the so-called bourgeoisie, and our society will be run almost as of yesterday. So that for meaningful change to occur, there needs to be an attempt at reorganizing the whole economic pattern and economic policies within this particular country. PPC believes in a judicious blending of private enterprise, which is highly diminished, and state participation in industry and commerce, especially on industries like mining, gold, diamond, asbestos, and so on, like forestry, and of course complete ownership of land. Now, in that kind of judicious blending of the two systems, we hope to arrive at a more equitable distribution of wealth.
Yeah, but you see a country, clearly you see a country in which black and white can live amicably on equal terms together.
That is correct. We see a completely non-racial society. We don't believe, for instance, in the so-called guarantees for minority rights, because guaranteeing minority rights implies the recognition of portions of the community on a race basis. We believe that in our country there shall be no minority, there shall be no majority, there shall just be people. And those people will have the same status before the law, and they will have the same political rights before the law. So in a sense, it will be a completely non-racial egalitarian society.
But will the vast number of blacks, after all their experiences, be able to live a life without giving vent to feelings of revenge, of...
Yes, we believe it is the duty of the vanguard political movement which brings about change to educate people's outlooks. I mean, in the same way that blacks have never lived in a socialist economic system, they're going to learn to live in one. In the same way that they've always lived in a racially divided society, they're going to learn to live in a non-racial society. They've got many things to learn, and all this must be brought to them and explained to the people by the vanguard movement, which is leading the revolution. So that I've got no doubt in my mind that people, and I know people in terms of my own background where I stay, are not necessarily revengeful. Are they sadistic in outlook? Now, the black man has got no ill intentions for the white man. The black man is only incensed at the white man to the extent that he wants to entrench himself in a position of power to exploit the black man. but beyond that, nothing more. And we don't need any artificial majorities, any artificial laws to entrench ourselves in power, because we believe once we come into power, our sheer numbers will maintain us there. So we do not have the same fear that the minority white government has been having all along, which has led to these many laws, designed to keep them there.
As you know, the main argument of the government is always that the black man just isn't on a civilizational level at present to pull his full weight politically.
Yeah.
And now, do you think of a one-man, one-vote franchise?
Yes, we do think so, entirely. Entirely one man, one vote, no qualification whatsoever, except the normal ones which you find throughout the world.
Don't you think that the black man, in fact, is perfectly well able?
The black man is well able, and the white man knows it. I mean, the irony of that kind of situation is that when the white government negotiates so-called independence for the so-called Transkei, they don't speak in terms of a qualified franchise. In the Transkei, every Transkeian votes, you see? And you get white nationalist politicians arguing that this is a system which is going to work for the Transkei. But somehow when it comes to the broader country, the blacks may not vote because they don't understand the sophisticated, economic patterns out here. They understand nothing. So they need to operate at a different sort of level. Now this is all nonsense. It is meant to entrench the white man in the position in which he finds himself today. We'll do away with it altogether. There will be a completely non-racial franchise, and the black and white will vote as individuals in our society.
Well, this is all fascinating. As an outsider visitor, I can only say that my feeling is that this is bound to be a very long and probably very bloody road.
There is that possibility. But as I said earlier on, it will be dictated, purely by the response of the Nationalist Party. If they've been able to see that in Rhodesia, Smith must negotiate with the leaders of the black people in Rhodesia, I think conflict is unavoidable, given the predictable response from the present system. And this conflict can be pretty generalized and extensive and protracted. My worst fear is that working on the present analysis, conflict can only be on a generalized basis between black and white. We don't have sufficient groups who can form coalition with blacks, that is, groups from the whites at the present moment. But the more such groups come up, the better to minimize that conflict.
Just listening to Steve Bantu Biko on the development and evolution of the Black consciousness movement. I recently had a chance to sit down with Andile Mngxitama to explore the current affairs in South Africa. Andile is a leading Black consciousness thinker and organizer in South Africa. He co-edited Biko Lives, Contesting the Legacies of Steve Biko, has published 4 essays in the New Frank Talk journals, and has frequently contributed to various media outlets that explore Africa in general and South Africa specifically. Enjoy the program. Faces with you specifically about the current situation or the current elections that have been going on in South Africa right now. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, no, the big moment right now is the local government elections in South Africa. And the ruling party, Nelson Mandela's African National Congress, the late Nelson Mandela's movement, is losing a massive vote in the main cities. It has, as things stand, it might not even retain Johannesburg, which is the economic hub. It might not retain the Tshwane or Pretoria, which is the political, if you like, capital of our country. It has already lost the Nelson Mandela Bay in the Eastern Cape. So this is a big shift in the electoral process, and to govern it, the ANC, the ruling party, will need assistance of smaller parties such as the Economic Freedom Fighters, who have come out basically saying that they are not interested in collision with the ruling party, basically then giving power to what is a neoliberal racist political party called the Democratic Alliance, which is basically the official opposition, national official opposition. It is from our perspective, we believe that these elections open up the real great possibilities for radical change, because we are simply saying, and we have been agitating, if you go to our one publication we use, which is the online www.blackopinion.co.za, there's an article I have written there where today I call for the Economic Freedom Fighters to give the ANC its portion of the vote in exchange for radical policy change. In other words, you say to them, you will keep the metros, but you'll have to legislate for land expropriation without compensation, for free education, for free quality health care, for good housing. In other words, you escalate these local government elections to national policy fundamental questions, which has not been addressed in the past 22 years of the ruling party's rule. But the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF of Julius Malema, is not interested in this line. It seems to us that it is going to go into collision with the racist, neoliberal DA and perpetuate, in a sense, the ongoing status quo, which is unfortunate because these elections unexpectedly has provided South Africa with a real possibility to push the ruling party, because it has the national majority in the national in parliament, to change policy. It is on the ropes. It is vulnerable. It is available for pressure. All is needed is to put that proposal forward.
No, that's great. And what are some of the conditions? You have a ruling party since apartheid, and it is not filtering down to the masses of the people. What are some of the ways that you guys are specifically doing, specifically your organization? And could you speak a little bit more about what you guys, specifically your organization, in the context of this?
Yes, our organization, Black First, Land First, is a Pan-Africanist Black consciousness organization, which is guided also by Thomas Sankara leadership style. Thomas Sankara was, of course, the president of Burkina Faso, who was murdered for his selfless example of how power can be used to benefit people. Now, our argument that we put forward as Black First, Land First is that South Africa remains a racist white supremacist country, after 22 years of democracy, the ruling party of Nelson Mandela has not changed the structures of power and economy in South Africa. White people, despite the fact that they're only 10% of the population, they own almost everything. In fact, only about 35,000 white families own 80% of the land in South Africa. We are a population of about 54 million people. So a tiny minority really controls, and this was as a result of colonialism and apartheid, as we know. The ruling party has not touched this reality. So part of the reason why it's losing the support of our people is because our people are simply disillusioned with how it has governed in the past 20 years. It will take 100 years to buy back, and I say buy back our land, in terms of the policies of this ruling party. Land was stolen from black people, but the ANC is saying that we must buy back that land. And we as BLF don't believe it is ethically or it is morally, politically, and even economically sustainable or acceptable that we should buy back our stolen land. What we've been doing as BLF, in fact, some of us were in jail for 8 days 2 weeks ago, because we had occupied the offices of the public protector in South Africa, demanding that they investigate white corruption. In South Africa, the laws that we have and the attitudes are racist. Corruption is synonymous with black people. And the institutions of government, the laws, and including the police, they only chase after black people. They don't do anything when white corruption happens. There is 26 billion rand stolen by white capital. We all know where it is. And the public protector, which is one of the institutions that needs to look on this matter of corruption, has refused for the past 5 years to deal with the matter. So we went to the offices of the public protector, protested there, and we were arrested. And we're going. In fact, we're going back to court. We're out on bail. We're going back to court on next week Friday, on the 12th. That is just one of our campaigns. The big campaigns that we're taking is to conscientize our people. In other words, going back to black consciousness, as was articulated by Steve Biko, linking up the question of black power, as was articulated in the United States of America, by the way, by people like Steve Biko, to say that the problem here is white racism. And the antidote to that cannot be anything than black power. We have to get this right. The biggest problem that's happening in South Africa is that we have been told to accept the coexistence with the settler colonialists who took our land and oppressors and continue to exploit our people. There is no reparations. There is no redress. So white supremacy is real, and we are working hard, and we're getting good feedback from our people to raise the flag of black consciousness and black power, because we believe this is the only real solution. And Black First, Land First is working with activists from the U.S. As we speak now, there's one sister who's associated with the Black Lives Matter, who is here in Azania, South Africa, and is doing work with us. We're learning from her, and she's learning from us as well. Because we believe the struggle of black people is the same struggle. The same problems of our people in America, in the Caribbean, in Haiti, the same problem that we see in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, and in South Sudan. We have the same similar problem, the same similar enemy. And we have to have a better consciousness about how we are located in the world.
Do you think that and this idea of conscientization is very, very important, and the linking, the international link, was the idea of resistance already there, and what you guys are doing is giving its institutional, organizational form?
Absolutely. In South Africa in the 1970s, we must remember, in South Africa in the 1960s, it was a big lull. It was a time when Nelson Mandela and others were imprisoned. And it was after the Sharpeville massacre. Black people had been killed in those big numbers. There was a lull, and our people lived in total fear. But in the 70s, we see the emergence of black consciousness, which led to the 1976 Black Power movement in Soweto, the Black Power uprising, the students' uprising. And the big input by Steve Biko and his black consciousness movement was precisely conscientization. We're not doing anything new. We're simply reviving what has been there and updating it, of course, for the 21st century. It is true that some questions were not addressed in the past, such as the question of patriarchy. We are much more aware of these questions now and working them into how we respond to the white supremacist reality, which has always been the same problem. So we are really, I mean, if you come to South Africa, you see our movement, the student movement here. It is a heightened sense of consciousness, and we're going back to the old teachings, but updating them to make sure that we take care of the awareness that we have in the contemporary. So our movement is not new at all. In fact, in our conference, our founding conference this May, our movement is only about a year old now. Last May, that was our official launch conference, we took a decision to unite all the Pan-Africanist groupings and the Black consciousness groupings in South Africa under the Azanian front. It's a long-term project, it's a difficult project, but we believe that we are making some progress.
So you're doing something that's very, very, Amilcar Cabral says, returning to the source.
We have to, absolutely. We are not going to reinvent the wheel. The work has been done, and the mistakes have also been committed. We must learn from the mistakes of the past. This is the most painful thing, that these movements of our people, if you think about Cabral himself, how he's taken out Sangara, Biko, Malcolm X, and the organizational forms which had made them possible, and how when they're taken out, we suddenly find that we have no leadership, and the movement is either wanes or dissipates. We're learning from that. We have to build organizational forms that can sustain the momentum over and above some of the most capable amongst us who are leading these processes. We have to learn from that, but also just understand the enemy is going to kill us. We must not play with that. The enemy is going to kill us. We're also taking serious precautions about how to avoid such mistakes. Steve Biko should not have been murdered the way he was. It's true also of Cabral. It's true with Malcolm X. It's true with our brother in the Caribbean, Walter Rodney. It should never have happened like that. But those are some of the big lessons that we're taking. And of course, we are paying close attention to the Black Panthers and how also they made some mistakes that we must not repeat.
So what are some of the collaborations across Africa with the other student movements in Burkina Faso and other places in the Congo with the Talima movement? What are some of, have you been in contact with those in collaboration and solidarity with those movements as well?
Yes, we are making steady progress. We have started in Botswana, which is not far from our country. We have a very good working relationship and solidarity with our brothers in Ghana. There is a program and a movement they're called the Quilombo. Now, this concept of the Quilombo, of course, goes back to the slavery, and we know that when our people were able to escape the plantation, would create the Quilombo away from the masses. That concept in South Africa also is part of the Azania school. We have in Khayelitsha, in Cape Town, a church which is the Quilombo. Together with the Quilombo in Ghana, we're doing work. In fact, in September, there's a conference, international conference in Ghana, which we are going to attend. Same with Kenya. Kenya, the big thing there is looking at African literature. It's more literature because the Kenyans have been done, Africans have been doing some really good work around African literature. And some of our members who are in the literary world are making these connections with the Kenyans. And of course, Zimbabwe is big. In Zimbabwe, we work directly with the ZANU-PF, the ruling party. We are pro-Mugabe. We have our own criticisms, but we are pro-Mugabe. We are pro-ZANU-PF. we're absolutely clear that the Zimbabwean situation has been created by imperialism, created by sanctions, and we are opposed to the foreign-funded regime change moves in Zimbabwe. So here in Azania, we take solidarity actions with the Zimbabwean people, and we are agitating and educating our people about the exact situation of Zimbabwe. Because land was given back to black people in Zimbabwe. White people the world over are punishing Mugabe for doing so, and they're terrifying and terrorizing South Africans, landless people, so that they don't also take land. Because they say, you're going to take land, you're going to starve like Zimbabwe. So we have to make our people understand why the Zimbabwean situation is the way it is. So a lot of education goes into raising the Zimbabwe question and raising consciousness about the enemies of our people there.
This is great. Lastly, before I let you go, you talked about the institutionalization of the movement of this resistance. Could you speak a little bit about the importance of the ideological compass or the ideological direction of these institutions? You mentioned Steve Biko, Thomas Sankara, and Frantz Fanon Cabral, even Amir Baraka said that the ideological deficiency is one of the things that are plaguing black movements across the world. Could you speak a little bit more about the importance of making sure that the stance, the framework of your institution is moving towards true resistance?
Yes. One of the big debates we have in our own movement is that we argue that we have made some progress also in the development of ideological clarity. We are much more clear about white supremacy, about the laws, how they operate, about how democracy is anti-black. We have gained a bit of a language which has kept, if you like, in step with the reality of our oppression, the question of patriarchy, radical black feminism, how these are important developments in the framework of the perspective that we develop. But our weakness, we believe, has been actually not so much the institutionalization of the ideology, but institution building for resistance. We don't have the organizational structures which march in tandem with ideological development. So that is why when some individuals are taken away, our movements collapse, or when there are internal contradictions, our movements are unable to hold them. We are paying attention a little bit also even how Mao Zedong dealt with the issue of contradictions among the people. We believe we have to understand the two levels of the contradictions, the antagonistic contradictions between us and the enemy, which can only be resolved through the obliteration of the enemy. And then there are secondary contradictions among the people. Here in the African continent, even at home, it's not so bad. We're dealing with the contradiction of tribalism. We're dealing with the contradiction of xenophobia. We call it Afrophobia because we only hate people from outside South African continent who look like us. White foreigners come here and they're not seen as foreigners. They are not get the violence that we visit our brothers and sisters from the African continent. There's a secondary contradiction. The handling of patriarchy has a serious potential to weaken the movement. And we're trying to locate the patriarchal contradiction as part of the secondary contradictions which are overdetermined by white supremacy, so that we are able to focus our attention to the real enemy and then deal with each other when we retreat into the Quilombo to deal with those contradictions amongst ourselves. So this movement between building organization movement and struggle, we believe we have to do this. Struggle as in direct action and putting our bodies on the line, and also to test them. When we went to jail, one of the things that we were very aware of, we're put in jail with so-called common criminals and so on, was how there's a disjuncture between our ideological advancement and our bodily preparedness to engage with real struggles at different points of challenges that present themselves. And we also in South Africa have neglected prison because we have a massive prison industrial complex here. And being in jail has also assisted us to, in a sense, focus our attention on how the prison system is part of the oppressive, exploitative racist system that break down our move towards liberation. So we think develop ideology, develop the organizational capacity to respond, to defend ourselves, to advance. But also we must be physically, in terms of the body, ready to engage in this struggle. So these are the three dimensions. The movement, we believe, our movement, Black First, Land First, must always introduce a dynamic in society. We're always going to go into confrontation. We're going to break laws. We're going to get the society talking to raise the level of understanding of the contradictions of racism in what we call the occupied Tanzania.
That was Andile. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, my brother. Struggle, one people.
That's it for Africa World Now Project for this week. I would like to thank you for joining us today and look forward to spending time with you next week. We can be reached through all your regular social media platforms. Email africaworldnowproject@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at AFWRLDNWPRJ. I'm your host and producer, James Pope. The Africa World Now Project Collective consists of international media journalist, executive producer, and human rights activist Mwiza Mutali, Africa World Now Project media correspondent Funa Ngonda, and technology advisor is Byron Gray of Grayworks Technologies. Africa World Now Project is heard every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on WSNC 90.5, a broadcasting service of Winston-Salem State University. Until next week, be peaceful, be safe, and above all, be intelligent.
Bismillah. Hey, chewing living by the G code. What the f is fleek though? Don't ask them, what do we know? What I forgot is better than whatever they remember. Never mind, I'm off it, it's quiet form. Time to put the temper tantrums to the quiet corner. Hush. That's enough, said the ruler. No suckers allowed to break bread or asunder. The daylight, lightning, and the thunder. The sun, moon, the stars, and the hunger. Abundance in bundles, blessings and troubles. Towers and tunnels, views and valleys, waves and peaks. Streets you from, sun, planet Earth. And ain't scared of no Mars attack. What type of bars is that? Stay off my jack. I'm out they corny riot garments. Top 5 dial on them, super fly, slicker, top pro, equal diving on them. You why you lying, homie? You won't play with my emotions, smoky. Big chief, heart rate, big beat, B-E-Y, I seen straight jacket, come clean, big said it was a dream. Now it's a living thing, with you and living kings, I mean it, I mean. Y'all seen in the R.E.D. Original nation, we solid, I mean it, straight jacket, come clean, y'all seen in the R.E.P. Original nation, we solid, we with you and living, you know with you and living.
Confronted by the ally nation, alien nation, the subjects and the citizens see the material religions through trauma and numb. Nothing is related. All the things of the earth and in the sky have energy to be exploited. Even themselves, mining their spirits into souls sold. Into nothing is sacred, not even their self. The ally nation, alien nation.
Emergency on planet Earth. The currency is murder, you a man of worth. They say the day is coming, drumming that you can't reverse. Watch the banner burn before the cannon burst. Don't taste an illusion, the nation hallucina. Hallelujah, taste of the future, the people, the shower, the pistol, the coward that's racing to shoot ya. Lonely martyrs, magic carpets, dirty blankets, Coca-Cola, soul controller, holy waters. Middle East mode, sand glorious. Cheat code in Babylonian, the Orient. My superhero got the people power. Yasin and Yasin, you should heed the hour.
With you and living kings, I mean it, I mean. I mean it, I mean. Yasin and Yasin in the R.E.B. I mean it, I mean. Original nation, with one solid, I mean. I mean it, I mean. Straight jacket, come clean, Yasin and Yasin in the R.E.B. Original nation, with one solid, with